All right, everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am Farah Kimji, your 2020 Toronto Crew President, and we are so happy to have all of you join us online for today's professional development webinar. Before we jump into today's content, I wanted to share a few announcements of upcoming events. So on May 26th, we have our first virtual happy hour. So we've been hosting crew coffees with the board every Tuesday, and we're going to start alternating those and going every other Tuesday. And in between, we'll be offering this new happy hour format at 4 p.m. on every other Tuesday. So it'll be a casual way to catch up with some of your colleagues from the Crew Network. So please be sure to register and join us. You can register through the e-blast that we send out, as well as on the website. As well, next week on May 28th, we have the second series of our building block edition. And the topic is due diligence and transaction closing. And I know there's a stellar panel lined up. So be sure to register for that event as well. I would now like to take a moment to thank our 2020 sponsors as displayed in the presentation. Your sponsorship allows us to continue to deliver relevant and important programming for our members, even through challenging times, and we are very appreciative of your support for Toronto Crew. So thank you, and I'm just going to scroll through as we have several sponsors, and I want to make sure you see them all there, and as well as our silver sponsors. So, give me 1 second here. Alrighty. So now I would just like to kind of walk everyone through a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, but all of you are on mute and without camera. There is a chat function on the right there, so you can say hi to each other, and so we can learn who's with us live today. There's also a handout section, and we'll be sharing a handout later in the presentation with you guys. There's also a Q&A function. So this is a chance for you to submit your questions directly to the presenters. They won't be shared with the entire group. And lastly, we also have a polling function. There are going to be some polls that we administer throughout the presentation to keep you guys engaged and collect some information. So be sure to participate in those polls. So now I'd like to dive in and just share a little bit about Toronto Crew. I know we have some non-members as well joining us today. And so the mission of Toronto Crew is that we are dedicated to helping women excel, influence, and lead throughout their real estate careers. During this time, our board has thought of what that means given today's current landscape. And we feel that means offering programs that support the professional development of our members, even as many of you from home. So today, I am very excited to introduce today's webinar focused on elevating your career. We're joined by two of our gold sponsors, Nicola Denning-Miller and James Ashley, the co-founders of HighView Partners, a talent search firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. Nicola and James have over 20 collective years of recruiting for the Canadian real estate industry and have helped thousands of job seekers make their best next move and hundreds of real estate firms make their best next hire. They offer a high quality and low volume approach to recruitment and have carved a stellar reputation in our industry, not just for the work they do, but by being a force for good when it comes to giving back to our community. They are involved in a number of speaking engagements with companies, associations, and industry events, tackling matters that relate to the hiring process to help employers and candidates, and are also involved in a number of charitable events to raise money for worthy causes. HighView is a proud sponsor of Toronto Crew, and for us, their support and advocacy for Crew and its members has been so amazing to witness. And Sharon and I personally really admire and appreciate the work that both James and Nicola do to support our industry and the advancement of its people. So I'll now pass it over to Nicola to make the introduction of their team and also for introducing today's webinar. Nicola, take it away.
Thank you so much, Farah. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Hope everyone is doing great today and that you're all staying healthy and somewhat sane. I'm looking out my window and it looks like we're in for a lovely week of weather. So hopefully that's going to help lift everyone's spirits a little bit. So today what we're going to do is shine the spotlight on the first part of elevating your career by taking a closer look at your career path. Now, many of you might have a clear idea of what your path looks like and you're wanting to expand your knowledge. Others might be feeling, a little bit lost in the wilderness and you might need some help sort of finding your way. So the ideas and the approaches that we're going to share with you today are hopefully going to speak to every single person in the audience. It might be that you're looking to get promoted from, within your current employer, or, you might be looking to find a new job working for someone else. Perhaps you're out of work right now and you're looking to get back in. It also could be a case, like Farah said, there's some non-members out there who are actually looking to get their break into the industry. So hopefully after today's session, there's going to be some takeaways for everybody to help you elevate your career. Now, as Farah highlighted, James and I are the co-founders of HighView Partners, and we are very proud members and sponsors of T-Crew. Both James and I have been involved in a ton of different associations over the years. But for us, T-Crew offers something really special. And I love the philosophy behind the empowering and the supporting of women. And James and I have always made no secret to the fact that we're massive advocates. So it's really in line with what we do as well. We don't know all of you. We've met some of you from working with you professionally. And there's others that we've obviously met through the events and the meetings that we've had. But we've just always found the members to be really sincere and very friendly and very insightful. And one of our values is being a force for good. And James and I are always trying to give back to our community and really help people as much as we can. So we really appreciate you tuning in today. We appreciate the opportunity to deliver this webinar. I'm really delighted, though, to report that James has actually trimmed his COVID hair and beard, especially for you all today. I didn't know that was going to happen. And if I had, I probably would have suggested that we do the webinar a couple of months ago.
I didn't think that it would be socially acceptable coming on the webinar today looking like a caveman, like I did when you last saw me before the long weekend.
On Friday.
So a few YouTube channels later, and I figured out how to put the clippers to good use.
But teasing aside, I mean, James's focus is obviously on real estate recruiting, but he's also a certified employment strategist and provides career coaching to industry professionals, and part of which is the topic of elevating your career. Hence, we're going to be sharing those insights today. So for the purpose of today, we're not referring to your career path in the traditional sense, where you move from your first role to your last role before retiring. What we're going to be doing today is talking about what drives your career path to the next level. And to do that, we need to understand our own perceived thoughts and the perceptions of others when it comes to understanding what motivates you personally and the value that you bring to each of your positions. So firstly, we're going to, better understand the motivations that drive your performance at work. We're going to obviously talk about creating your career value proposition. James will explain that a little bit more shortly. And then goal 2 is going to be reached in the second part of our series by developing, to elevate your career today, developing a concise, a consistent and a compelling message when it comes to what motivates you and the value that you bring. So we really hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I'm now going to hand over to James, who will walk you through the conversation.
Thank you, Nick, for the warm introduction, and thanks to Farah as well for introducing HighView today. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us. We are going to explore part 1, where we're going to pull back the layers to better understand your own perception of self and also the perceptions that others hold out there in the industry about who you are, how you think, how you feel, how you act, and how you perform. So to achieve this, we're going to explore the behavioral concept of motivation, but we're also going to explore the process of creating a career value proposition and how both the concept and the process help to shape our career path moving forward. So we're going to start with some knowledge around the subject matter, and then we're going to discuss some of the exercises that you can take on once you leave today's webinar. And Farah talked about the housekeeping. There is the Q&A. We will be running the polls. So if you look at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you see the little icon with the checklist with the ticks. When you see that on screen, that means that we're going to be running a poll, or we're going to be sharing some handouts with you. So have a look for that as we go through the webinar. So firstly, let's start with taking a closer look at motivations, the driving force behind why we choose what it is that we choose that we do. And we're going to begin by looking at businesses and what drives businesses forward, because it's really important to understand the motivations of your audience. So your audience might be inside of your existing place of work and you're looking to be promoted from within. It could be that you're looking for joining a new company and taking on a new opportunity. So it gets us to understand how both the values between ourselves and the hiring manager align. So I will mention that the tables that you're going to see are by no means the be all and end all. They're not exhaustive, but from looking at the literature and doing the reading around the subject matter, these are the ones that were jumping out to us. So I'm going to start with the first 5, which is these are really the drivers of a business. So it is performance, the profitability, engagement and satisfaction, culture and values. So we're going to start working from left to right. So when we talk about performance, it could be the financial performance of the business. It could be the performance in terms of the service that it delivers. It could be the tenants. It could be the number of buildings, the size of the portfolio that you have, the inventory, the leases. It could be the technology that supports the framework of the business as well. So performance is a key driver. The second is the profitability, gross and net profit, the operating margins, the return on capital and investment, or it could be the share price for the shareholders. The business might also be driven by the engagement levels of its employees, tenants, shareholders, investors, and contractors, but also the level of satisfaction that they experience when they're working or engaging with the business. In terms of culture, we're talking about business practices and processes, the beliefs and the behaviors that the business hold true, and the interactions that members within the business have with one another. And finally, the values. These are the guiding principles that really drive the priorities and the standards that the business set and begin to move that business towards its mission and the objectives that there are along the way. Now, if you're working inside of the business and you're looking to be promoted from within, you may be very familiar with what the motivations and drivers are, and you might have a good level of knowledge and detail as to what each of these components are. However, if you're on the outside of the business and you're looking to join a new company and you're looking to be hired, then it might be a little bit less clear to you. So we would encourage you to really step outside and use some of the forums that are available to you. Online, digital is a great way to find out information about what drives any business or organization. So rather than singling out a real estate company and looking at what their presence is online, I thought we would just start today by having a look at Crew. And so you can see quite clearly and quickly with a few clicks of the mouse that you get a wealth of information begins to open up about the variety of sources that are speaking to who Crew is, what it is about, what drives them, what are their motivators, what the culture looks like, what they hold their values to be, the types of members that they want joining the organization, what their success record has been. So there's a lot of information out there to allow you to begin to connect and understand how that business or that organization operates. But as there are motivations, there are also challenges. So with this, we've taken a look at a study. We've looked at a number of different articles, but this appeared to be the most reliable and valid piece of research. Now, it does date back to 2013. It was conducted by a research company where they took over 500 executives from companies all across Canada. It had a margin of error of 4.4%. it had a confidence level of over 95%. So the information is relatively valid and reliable. So we're going to start with our first poll, Nicola. So if we're able to release that to the group. And the first question we have there in the poll is the greatest challenges that are facing Canadian businesses. Now, just take into mind this study was done back in 2013, and a lot has changed in the last 10 or so many weeks. But the poll there, take a few moments just to decide what your answer is. And Nicola, I'll hand it over to you when the answers are coming in to share with the group.
Yep, they're just beginning to come in now, James. Lots. Well, so far, I think the general consensus here is that there is a shortage of skilled workers, followed very closely behind by the general state of economy. So it certainly looks as though that's what everyone's saying right now.
Everyone must have read the study then, because they're absolutely spot on. Yes, a shortage of skilled workers, 31% responded that was the greatest challenge that they were facing, and followed secondly by the general state of the economy. Let's move on now to taking a bit of a closer look on the next poll. So if you'd like to release that, Nicola.
Yeah.
And in this poll, we're looking closely at what is difficult when it comes to finding skilled employees, and what challenges do employers face? So what would you choose to be your top challenge?
I can hear the brains thinking. Tick, 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 tick. This is great. We have a lot of attendees.
Fantastic.
So it seems at the moment, so why is finding skilled employees in Canada difficult? Seems to me that the general consensus is a competitive market.
Okay.
Overwhelming.
Okay. So the competitive job market was 12% of respondents came back to say that was the biggest challenge that they were facing. The top pick was finding qualified candidates. So having candidates that have the right qualifications to do the work, followed by, the others are pretty closely compared with work ethic. The physical location was a barrier as well, from home to work and work to home. And also as you mentioned, the competitive job market. So we'll move on to the third and final poll for the study. And so if you'd like to release that, Nicola, and this is, what are the most important soft skills that a hiring manager is looking for during the hiring process? And there was a long list on the study, but we've highlighted the ones that were closer towards the top.
Beginning to come in now for sure. Okay, and another overwhelming consensus here, communication skills.
Okay. So communication took the second spot. Less variation between the skills here. Positive attitude was at 36%. That was the number one. Communication number two. Teamwork took the third spot, and that work ethic again, which we saw in finding the skilled employees, appears again in the soft skills. Surprisingly or not, 67% said it was somewhat to very difficult to find and hire people with the right soft skills. So now you have a clearer sense of how employers are behaving, how they're thinking. Let's now do some self-reflection work. So we're going to flip this now into what are your motivations. And in switching gears, we're going to take a look through the possible motivators that drive your performance. And as we're going through this, I'd like you to begin to think about, how do these motivators impact you today? Now, we've selected 10 from a list of many, again, from reading the literature that is online. We have not organized these in priority, and we will save that for the poll for people to share what matters most to them. And again, this is by no means exhaustive list. So here are the first 5. So we have intrinsic motivations, connections, mastery, creativity, and influence. So let's explore these a little bit further. So when we talk about the intrinsic motivation, we're coming back to the value piece. So really, what speaks to you and what are your guiding principles? Also, recognition, appreciation, and acknowledgement for the work that you do is also very important. Or it could be just personal growth, your emotional, mental, physical well-being. When we talk about connections, we're talking about the team. We can be talking about the cohesiveness of the team or the collaboration between members of the team in sharing ideas and moving the dial forward. In mastery, it's about expanding knowledge and expanding your skills and how that feeds into the achievements that matter to you. Creativity is about innovation. It's about finding solutions and thinking outside of the box. And I think with what has happened in the last so many weeks, we've all really been pushed into that creative way of thinking, and that being a real driver about how we go about our work, how we communicate with each other on a day-to-day basis. The other motivation that might be driving you is the ability to influence and to make decisions, to have or take accountability or give accountability and make changes within the business. So we're going to release the first poll, and the first poll is to select the top motivation that matters most to you today. So Nicola, if you'd like to release that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's fingers have dropped off right now.
Okay. So this poll is really designed to understand what matters most to you inside of where you are at the present time when it comes to your own motivations that are driving your performance forward.
So we have 2 that are definitely the most popular. So the top is intrinsic, followed quite closely by connections.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Good. We will, that piece is really for everyone just listening in. So we're not going to delve too much into a conversation because we're going to get into exercises and practices later on, but just make a note of that. And then the next poll we're going to release now is if you had to choose one of the 5 that you would like to improve or work on tomorrow, not necessarily meaning Thursday, but the weeks and months and years that follow, what would that motivation be? So we'll release that poll, Nick. Mm-hmm. What is it that going forward you really want to work on and exercise and practice to improve?
It's hard to choose amongst these ones, isn't it? Because they're all so important.
Absolutely. And there was no priority in how we've selected these. It was just really inside of the literature that these were the ones that were coming up more often than not.
It's overwhelming again. Actually, it's learning, followed closely by financial.
Was that the poll? Did we release the poll on the motivations?
Yep.
James,
okay.
I think Farah here, everyone, but I think I was the one who uploaded your polls, and I think we missed redoing that second intrinsic motivation. So we just released this.
Okay.
You're probably wanting to release next. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. Don't worry about it, Farah. Yeah, we the one here is what motivation would you like to focus more effort towards inside your career at this time? And it was learning and finances, but obviously we can come back to that and comment a little bit more, James.
Okay, we'll move on to the next 5. So the next 5 that we have to talk about is we have location, we have the ability to earn, to learn, to build, and also to explore. So let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. So location, proximity to home, which has obviously changed for most of us, if not all of us, of late. So that is a key driving factor. And certainly in terms of recruitment, when we're speaking with candidates and also speaking with clients and hiring managers, that again is a recurring theme time and time again about the commute to and from work. Is a major driver in people's decision making. It could be that you're looking for travel. You want to work locally. You might want to work far and wide and take regional, national, and international level roles. You may be looking to relocate. Also, the workplace and the environment can have an impact as well on your drive. When it comes to earning, we'll start with you and the compensation and the benefits that you earn as a result, and then it could move into more extrinsically the business that you work for and the profits of the business and the profit shares of the shareholders. When it comes to learning, we are talking about the new technical skills that we take on. It could also be polishing up on existing technical skills or spending more focus and time on the soft skills and just deepening and widening that knowledge base for both. When we build, we can build inside of relationships and the people that we're working with, whether that's internally or externally. It could be the real estate portfolio. It could be in terms of expanding and acquiring new assets or repositioning the assets or strategizing the assets in a new way. Building might not necessarily be sort of growing in size. It could be consolidating in size. And also the systems and the processes and the framework that support the business. Now, in terms of exploring, we're talking here about more sort of the vision that you have and getting involved in strategic thinking, being able to push the boundaries on what it is that the business stands for and what the business does, as well as dealing with some of the challenges that need to be solved along the way. So I think we might be out of sync with the polls. I don't have viewership of the polls, so there is a poll.
At this point, it was, what motivation would you like to focus more effort
on learning?
Your career, and overwhelmingly it came back as learning, followed by financial motivations, the earning capacity.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for everyone for contributing your thoughts to that discussion. So at this point, hopefully we've built a big enough picture around what is driving and motivating the businesses and also your own personal drivers. And we're now going to take this conversation into the next part of our webinar, which is creating and building your career value proposition. Now, you've probably heard the term value proposition used in the corporate world to differentiate a brand, to really exemplify the value that an organization offers to its end users. So in terms of like companies use a value proposition to answer a target market's question, like why should I buy your products or services? It is the same thought process behind your career value proposition. So you're effectively asking your current employer or your future employer, why should you hire me? Or they're asking, why should I hire or promote you? So think of value propositioning as one of sort of three things rolled into one. It's about your brand message, it's about your marketing strategy, and it's also about your sales pitch. And to be effective, we need to understand all the levels involved and to help us deliver that concise, consistent, and compelling message. So it consists of three components. Firstly, we've got the buying motivators. These are not your motivators. This is the employer. We're going to talk about supporting qualifications, and we're also going to talk about the add value attributes. So let's come back to buying motivators. So employers are seeking to fill positions. They're essentially purchasing employees. And so therefore, they're going to have very specific motivators. And there's a price in order that they need to pay for that transaction. Their motivators generally fall within 5 categories, which we've identified earlier, being performance, profits, engagement, culture, and the values of the organization. So matching up with the employers' buying motivators are really how the company expects to fit the bill for making the hire or promoting you from within. Now, when we talk about the supporting qualifications here, this is about your branding the market, and you need to demonstrate the qualifications that directly address what the buying motivators are. Those could be or encompass very specific skill sets, like we talked earlier about the technical and the soft skills, your abilities, your education, your experience, your credentials, your accomplishments, your level of seniority. Now, what you want to do at this point is select the most significant qualifications for use in the value proposition. Otherwise, your offering could be perceived or received as being too bulky, or it may dilute the message that you want to leave in a memorable way to your audience. But qualifications alone don't solve the problem. So when you're articulating your supporting qualifications, you need to think in your mind, this somewhat equals what other candidates are putting forward and what they display in their valuable qualifications. So you need to differentiate yourself from others. And in order to do that, we come to the third point here, which is the added value. So when we talk about added value, we're talking about the unique individual benefit that you bring to the table. It could be, you may see this as like your clincher in a sales pitch to the employer. We know from the findings in the study that there are certain challenges that businesses face, finding specialized skills, finding certain soft skills, such as that positive attitude, communication, teamwork, the work ethic, as well as it could be just finding the ROI. So getting that return on the investment for them to go through the hiring process in terms of how you deliver on the performance objectives that they have around profitability or the business as a whole. You may also want to have a think about just the personal touch. We are all unique in our own way, shape, or form. And so how we communicate our own message. And also, finally, looking at how we really connect those dots together. So how do we take our added value? How do we take our supported qualifications? And how does that feed the plant over there on the left-hand side, the buying motivators? So, back to the overarching picture, there are 3 parts to creating a value proposition. You must consider each of these together to create that concise, consistent, and compelling message. And we'll come to some exercises later on to talk about this in more detail. Nicola, is there anything you'd like to share at this point?
Yeah, we've just had a great question come through, actually. How do you know what an employer's motivations are? And I think the key here is that you can never assume what they are, and you have to try and find out what they are. So what I would recommend is, doing your research. So, looking online, Googling the company and trying to find out if they've been having any specific challenges, if any particular values hold true to them, if they've had any prominent accolades or achievements. Ask your network. If you know anyone that works there, ask those people as well, because it's really, really important before you sell your value that you understand what those motivators are. So just to sort of give you an example here, I've just been writing down a couple of notes. So if you know that they're all about the cost savings, then when you're in an interview situation, you would be talking about where you have positively impacted the bottom line. If they're really into community involvement, you're going to want to talk about how you have increased, say, tenant engagement, or you've motivated your team. If their values, for example, are diversity and inclusion, then you're going to want to talk about what behaviors you exemplify, and when you're building your team, and talk about how you've positively impacted that for your current employer. So it's just making sure that you're selling the right value that to match to the employer's motivator.
Yeah, great points there, Nick. And it is really about creating those stories that portray the experience that matters most to the employer, and having tangible outcomes and results to talk about. So it's great to say these things, but we really need to tie them into where have you had an impact, where have you had a result, what was the output of what it is that you took on. So great points there. So now we've done more of the knowledge base, we're going to move on to more the practical steps that you can take moving forward. And we are going to release a handout at the end that has a number of different practices. All the exercises that we're sharing will be in that handout. So that will be delivered to you at the end of the webinar. So in terms of next steps, I think this is a fantastic quote. The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. And that is what the Johari window is about discovering. I'm a big fan of using this model. I often use it during career coaching sessions with my clients. So let's start by introducing this technique. Now, this model's been around for a very long time. So some of you may be very aware of this, or this may be new territory for you. It dates back to the mid-1950s. And the technique helps people to better understand themselves and the relationships that they forge with others. So it's very much in the knowing and the sharing of oneself where Johari can be effective. And much of what we've discussed today is not only about self-discovery, but it's also linking back to the communication that you have with others. And this exercise will certainly help you to get there. So in terms of the model, it's made up of 4 regions and quadrants. So on the top left, we've got the open arena. So this is what others know about you and what you know about yourself too. The blind area on the top right, what others know, but you do not. The hidden, the facade, is what we're avoiding, what we're hiding, what perhaps we keep in secret. And the unknown is what neither party know. They don't know and you don't know. So before we reconvene part 2, and hopefully many of you will come back to join us, as in part 2, we're going to be looking at building and discovering your career brand, we encourage you to take on this exercise. And there's a document in the download with the exercise at the end of the session to help guide you. So in there, you're going to find that there's going to be 2 sets of adjectives. Firstly, there's the positive adjectives, and the ones that might be a little bit more challenging to stomach, which is the constructive adjectives. Maybe I should have kept the positive ones up on the screen a little bit longer. But these are adjectives used to describe your personality by you and by others. So what we encourage you to do is first start with yourself, look at the 2 sets of adjectives, and decide what are the top 6 for each list that you feel most closely represent your personality. And once you've selected your answers, you're going to place them on the Johari window. And they're either going to fall into the open arena of what you know and so do others, or it's going to fall into the facade and the hidden area, what they don't but you do. It won't fall into blind or unknown. So you're going to begin to sort of build that picture around yourself. Now the bravery really begins, and that's asking people at home or your close circle of friends. So just take one step out into the stretch zone and exercise with the people that know you dearly and repeat the process with them. Ask them, what are the top 6 in the positives and what is the top 6 constructive? Now, if they exhaust the list, but they think there's others there that we've not collected, then by all means, ask them to share those with you. But this is really going to help to build that picture of what others think of you. And again, the message here today is very much, it's not just about the perception of self. It is also very much about how others perceive you too. We don't want to move you into the panic zone with this. So when you're asking your co-workers, your hiring managers, or perhaps industry connections, think wise, take some time to really think about who you're putting this out to. And if there's a lot of pushback and people are saying, yeah, I don't really want to, delve too deep into the constructive side, then let them perhaps just share the positive adjectives. But I guess the juice here is very much in understanding both sides of the coin, both sets of adjectives. And what this ultimately is going to help you to do is, and Nicola and I, we've practiced this ourselves recently. So we had a go at this, didn't we, Nicola?
We sure did.
And what did you discover was your blind spot when we practiced it?
Apparently, I'm very stubborn.
I would say very.
Well, it was interesting, the conversation, because I said to James, I was like, am I stubborn? No, I'm not. And he was like, no, you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. He's like, yes, you are. No, actually, yes, clearly I am stubborn.
Yeah, and for me, we went into the open arena, and you chose perfectionist, and I was expecting that may be called out. So I was very aware that is something that I certainly do try to exercise, and I do have an attachment to trying to do everything perfectly, and learning certainly over the years and from working with you as well, Nicola, just to really sort of let go of that somewhat, but certainly an area of awareness. What about the hidden and the facade? Was there anything that you didn't share with me that you'd like to share, or are we stepping into the panic zone?
Actually. Yeah, and I'm not a particularly nervous person, but I have to say, like over the last couple of months, I have been feeling nervous. nervous about, what the future holds, where the business is going, the health of family and friends, the same reasons that everyone would give. But yeah, feeling nervous, and that's never a characteristic that I would have, described myself as.
No, I certainly wouldn't describe you as that either. But given the times to be expected, I'm sure many others that are listening in are feeling perhaps that's the same way and can relate. So the other box is the unknown. And what we would encourage you to do in this area when you take on the exercise is look at all the leftovers. So all the adjectives that did not come up, and that might fall into the unknown category. It might be an absolute no-no, or you might look at some of those and go, oh, interesting. Maybe that is something that I do exercise at times. So good to sort of look at this from all angles. I think the big takeaways here is the more people you ask, the more angles you are about to see. And it will vary from person to person. There will be some reoccurring themes, but there'll also be some differences that you just were not aware of. And I think this really shines a bright light on all the different angles. And I often say this to Nicola, like human beings are like prisons. And when the light goes in, it can reflect out in so many different angles, and people can perceive the same thing, the same object in so many different ways. But the end goal with this is ultimately what you're trying to do is reduce that blind spot, and you're trying to expand that open area and that arena. And I guess the more that you know about yourself and the more that people know about you, the more you can begin to communicate on the same wavelength. By asking for feedback, you can sort of simultaneously reduce your blind spot while increasing the amount and quality of information that you are sharing with the audience. So please do take the time to explore this technique. I'm sure that it will help you to get a better sense of knowing who you are and what you choose to share. Moving on from that, you may want to listen to some thought leaders. And there's so many great speakers out there and authors that fall within the categories of motivation, communication, and knowing oneself. But here are the top 3 that we've chosen that we feel are most relevant to today's conversation. So you may be familiar with all of them. Their messages have spread across the world far and wide. We'll start with Daniel Pink. So Daniel wrote a book back in 2009 called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And the book touches upon theories. It's more strategic than perhaps the other 2. And it looks at evidence-based research. And Daniel's argument is that human motivation is largely an intrinsic process. And I think we mentioned that earlier, and that stood out for people, that the aspects of this motivation can be divided up into autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, I read this book about 10 years ago, and in my view, I think many of the principles still apply to the world as we see it today. Next is Brené Brown, very popular across North America, and obviously she's on Netflix as well now too. Brené, she launched to fame with her TED Talk on vulnerability back in 2011. And since then, she's had a string of bestsellers, and most of them are living in my bookcase at home, including Daring Greatly, Dare to Lead, Brave the Wilderness, and this one that I've highlighted, which is The Gifts of Imperfection. This, again, was written over 10 years ago, and it's based on original research, plenty of encouragement from Brené as she explores the psychology behind releasing that definition of an imperfect world, something that I should probably read again, now knowing about my arena in Johari, and embracing living life in a very authentic way. And I think it really ties well perhaps to some of the challenges that we find around not exposing our motivations or the obstacles or hurdles that get stuck in the way, and start to bring down some of those boundaries that we put up. And finally, Michael Sinek. And I have no idea, Nicola, what was in the water in 2009, 2010, but all of these books and speakers were coming up inside of that era. Many consider Simon as a leader in the movement around how we can inspire ourselves to create our best work, but also inspire others to do the same. I took this quote straight from his website on the book itself, and it just said that Start With Why shows that the leaders who've had the greatest influence in the world, they all think, act, and communicate in the same way. Very interesting. And it's the opposite of what everyone else does. So there you have it, 3 very compelling reads to help build your compelling message. I also wanted to highlight the study that I used earlier. So you may want to delve into that. That is very specific to the Canadian workplace and that National Business Survey. So you might want to dive into that and look at the report, and it might just begin to open up your eyes more widely to what some of the factors are that are driving decision-making when it comes to hiring. And finally, there is the People Who Perform podcast, which myself and Nicola and the team at HighView Partners, we launched this, we'll call this our COVID moment of creativity, if we shall. So the podcast is called People Who Perform. We speak with industry leaders and up-and-coming stars in the industry to really understand better what their career paths have been and what's driving their best performance. And your very own Toronto crew president, Farah, has recently been involved in the podcast, which I believe, Nicola, is that being released today?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, after this webinar, in fact. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile after this, you'll get a little 30-second sneak peek, and then you can go through and actually watch the whole episode. But it's fantastic, and I'm really proud of it, Farah. You'll love it.
So a big thank you to Farah for your contributions and being involved. And I know that other crew members have also put their hand in the air, and in the coming weeks, they'll be participating in the People Who Perform podcast as well. If you're listening in, please do go to the link online. It's on every major podcast, Spotify, Apple. You just need to type in People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast, and you can take a listen. We'd love to hear your feedback. And also, if you'd like to participate, and this is something of interest to you, it's really designed to help more people learn about our industry, to encourage others to either step into real estate or step up and elevate their career. So I'm going to bring that now to our final exercise. And again, all of this will be captured inside of the document. And that is to ask yourself questions. And we've highlighted 5 for both the behavioral concepts of motivation and also 5 for the process, the career value proposition. So starting with the motivations, what are their motivations? Meaning the company, the hiring manager, the employer, whether you're in the business or you're looking to enter into a new business. What is it that is driving them? And we've highlighted a few of them earlier with performance, profit, engagement, culture, and value. So have a look around those subject matters and then bring this inside of you. What are my motivations today? And we've shared some of those in the earlier slides. What are you looking to take on tomorrow? So what really matters to you going forward from here, from the 10 that we've highlighted, or there may be others that you've considered during this presentation that have come up for you. What is standing in my way both today and tomorrow? And this is a really interesting point, Nicola, and if you want to jump in on this as well, but you know, we do have this ability to sort of be our worst enemy at times and set up these sort of the barriers around that. So it could be just out of fear of people knowing who we are and what our message is and how we'll be perceived. It could also just be our expectations that we set a really high bar on what others expect of us. So that could be some of the things that are standing in your way. Nicola, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I was going to say, if those are some of the fears, I really recommend Brene Brown's new podcast, which is called Unlocking Us. And that will really help you overcome that vulnerability and be courageous and put yourself out there out of your comfort zone. So it's a really, really great book.
Great, thank you. I think you've just answered question 5 there with Brene Brown. So what will help you overcome those hurdles? So you can think about some of the exercises. Hopefully these exercises that we're going to give you today will help to do that. Let's move on to the career value proposition that we talked about earlier. So what are their buying motivators, the company, the hiring manager? And again, it links in quite nicely with the motivations that we've explored today. So by understanding that, you can begin to build the framework around what are my supporting qualifications that are not too bulky, that will not dilute a memorable message to my audience. And then there's the clincher, which is the added values. And we explored a few of those, being the technical skills, the soft skills, the return on investment that I can bring, the personal touch that I offer that others do not, because this is who I am and I am the only me in this world. And also just connecting those dots, really joining the lines between the motivators, your qualifications, and your attributes. And so with this, you may want to then do the same that you did in Johari and take this outside of yourself and ask your network. And perhaps for this, I wouldn't go too far and wide, but just ask people that you really trust, you really respect, who know you know them, and have that honest conversation about what they think your driving motivators are, where they think you could be perhaps more motivated, and what your value proposition is telling them. Does it really speak to them that it is a concise, consistent, and compelling message? And I'm going to leave you, before I hand back to Nicola, with this image, this icon here. And this is something, this is very much on the HighView brand here. But think of today that sort of we are the piece in the middle, the people who perform. And today, our performance measure has been to understand those motivations, get clear on what motivates them, what motivates me, and how can I put that into a message. And by doing that, it will help employers who you are targeting to perhaps see you as being that best next hire, but also for yourself when you are navigating your way through your career path, at whatever level and whatever stage you are at in your career. It can just help you to sort of really get clear on the next move that I make is my best next move. So a big thank you for listening to me today. I'm going to hand back to Nicola now for the wrap up and the Q&A.
That's great, James. I think that's been incredibly insightful. I mean, there's certainly some valuable pointers in there when it comes to the motivations behind our actions and the way that we can establish and communicate our value, you know, not only to our network, but in particular to the people that are making the hiring decisions, the one that will decide on whether you get that new job, whether you get that promotion. So, you know, I just hope that, you know, this today has helped you to think about new ways to approach your career path. Obviously, we've talked through understanding your motivators and what drives your performance, and also the way that you can articulate your value. Obviously, what our objective is to help you to create and articulate your career value proposition. And if you can understand the employer's motivations as well and find synergy between what your motivations are and their motivations, hopefully that's really going to help you communicate your value. So the next session, the part 2 of this series, we're going to take a closer look at building your career brand online and in person. So I really hope that you're going to be able to join us for that. But I think for now, I think it's going to be, you know, let's go to a Q&A and open this up for all the attendees. So if you could start by firing some questions through. We've already had a few actually, which is great. So one question that came through was, finding employees with the right skill sets can seem to be a primary concern of employers. What skill sets are commercial real estate asking us to source for them during searches? So I think in this sense, we have talked about, the right qualifications and skills are obviously really important, but I think it's the soft skills at this stage, especially with what we've been going through with COVID, and that is resilience and adaptability and flexibility, self-motivation, i.e. for working at home, and how you communicate with your team members and your boss and the tenants. So in my advice, it would be to look at how you communicate those soft skills. Would you agree with that, James?
I would. I'm thinking about some of our clients and what they've shared more recently, and I would say that there's been more of a recurring theme of late to really strip back to basics, like what is needed, like what are the foundational aspects that are needed to do the role. And then once you're there, a lot of the other pieces you can actually learn on the job and through the experience of doing it, because sometimes that can make it very cloudy. You have this very clear and defined expectation of what you want and the experience and the skills and the knowledge and the credentials and so on and so forth. And absolutely, there is a foundational level that you need. But some clients have just called it sort of stripping it back. So I'm pulling that back. I'm really looking closely at what I have the capacity to teach and learn and help them build. But look more closely at that drive, look closely at that work ethic. Like, how do they support their team members? How do they adapt? Are they resilient to deal with the problems that are happening? And so it's very much more on that soft skills basis that I think more of our clients are looking to hire, by stripping back away from their expectations.
We just had another question come through, actually, which relates to this topic. So the statement here: so the soft skills and the personal touch can be assessed rather clearly in interviews. It's very hard to verify them through CVs, and yet they need to be added to the CV in order to get you an interview. So how should you approach mentioning soft skills without sounding too generic? I think that's a fantastic question. My advice on this is twofold. So under each sort of section of skills and experience on a resume, you can include an achievement, something that you have done, a value add within that organization. And again, you can relate that back to the employer's motivations. So talk about a project that you volunteered for, talk about cost savings, think about it as in the STAR technique, the situation, the task, what the action was, and what the result was, because the employer will want an all-encompassing picture. But that's a way of doing it. Or you can just have a key achievements section on your resume. The other thing is, you could sort of, whether you support charities, whether you do rides to conquer cancer, whether you're involved in your community, doing food drives, these are things that you can add onto your resume as well. And that may sort of fit the culture aspect of their motivators. The other way is obviously with a cover letter, if you wanted to give a little bit more detail. But yeah, I think that's a great question. And then hopefully that will get you past the sort of first hurdle and actually get you that face-to-face interview where you can exemplify those behaviors in a little bit more detail. Anything to add there, James?
I would just add to that again from the employer angle, is that clients are becoming more savvy. They are investing more time upfront to get to know candidates now. We've moved away from just that biographical interviewing process. There's a lot of behavioral interviewing. There is a lot of looking at the alignment between our value proposition as a business and your value proposition as an employee and a candidate. So I see companies investing more time now to, do more interviews, interview with new techniques. I know a number of clients that take coffee time. So it's not just always about being, in the office and doing the interview across the boardroom table, although many of the interviews that our candidates have been doing over the last so many weeks has been video conferencing, but getting to know someone over a coffee or going for a walk now that the better weather is here, and just seeing how somebody really thinks, feels, acts, and performs, and building a bigger and more holistic approach to hiring, because we all know the cost of, when it doesn't work for both the candidate and the employer. So just to be mindful of that as a candidate, clients are becoming more savvy and investing more time.
So we've had another question here come through. How do you see coronavirus affecting the industry when it comes to hiring? James and I and our team, that there has been a slowdown in hiring over the last couple of months, which we completely understand and expected. But in terms of how it's going to affect hiring, so in my view, I think, the interview process is obviously going to change. So rather than face-to-face, there's going to be a lot more interviews via video. So, companies are going to be able to bring in hiring managers from all over the country, which I think is great. I think that a lot of companies do have a freeze on external hiring right now. And so there may be an ability to repurpose internal staff. So, it may be positive for internal candidates who are wanting to step up and look for internal promotions. So now would be the time to put your hand in the air if you have been sort of hankering for that next step up, because there's probably going to be more of a willingness to look internally than there is externally. I think new onboarding is going to be obviously becoming virtual as well. I've heard of companies who are doing, sort of using VR technology to give candidates a bit of a tour around their offices, as part of the interview process. I think one of the biggest challenges with doing a lot of this online onboarding is going to be sharing the company culture and really sort of allowing people to feel part of the culture and immersed and part of the business. So I think that employers are going to have to sort of look at doing more team building exercises over Zoom or whatever platform. I've loved actually what you guys, T-Crew, have been doing with the coffee dates and the virtual cooking shows and the different sort of webinars as well. And that will really help on board as well. And just spending more time, concentrated time, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day with the new hires, as opposed to sort of checking in and out throughout the day. And anything to add there, James?
I would love to, but I think we might be out of time. So I see that we're hitting 1 o'clock.
No problem. Gosh, I completely lost track of time there. So pretty much that wraps up part 1 of the webinar series then. So we really appreciate your participation. And we look forward to you joining us on June the 24th for part 2.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, James and Nicola. What a great session. Super engaging. I was tuning in the whole time. Guys, we've shared some handouts in the handout section, and we'll share the presentation with all those that registered following this event. So thank you both again. And looking forward to part 2.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.